Hey,
Right. And Sarah said she's going to be able to make it again today, so
good.
we'll wait for her. And I assume Gretchen is, since she seems to be actively typing into the notes doc.
Excuse me. Archiving data is the channel that you suggested for.
Archiving Techne on Edgy.
Oh, right.
I don't know if anybody really uses, not even in the archiving channels on Archivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hasn't had any conversation in quite a while.
Right. And he thought it was at Kelsey's request?
Yeah, I remember having a conversation about this in one of the archiving meetings, and I was concerned that it might not actually get used, and Kelsey and Brendan were like, "Oh no! Like once it's there, we're totally going to use it." So I really, honestly, have no idea if it's getting used or not.
And it sounds like it's connected to this VPC based deployment. So I was about to knock this down this morning, and then I realized I guess I shouldn't.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that late last night. I was like, "Oh wait, Dan was going to knock that down, but there was that one thing." Yeah, we should check. But I'm not sure that it's really being used, and even if it is, my concern is in Kubernetes you don't necessarily have persistent storage.
Not unless you set it up. Yep.
So and it definitely didn't sound like Jonathan had anything to say about having done something special for storage.
Right.
Because otherwise IPFS is just going to write to disk, which is totally ephemeral in that setup. So also, like, if stuff is being stored in that thing,
Right.
it's not particularly reliable.
Okay. I think I will give Archiving Techne 48 hours to tell me not to knock that over.
Sounds good. Hey, Gretchen and Sarah.
How you doing?
Good.
We were just talking through one of the things that came out of the meeting with Jonathan about AWS setup as he's leaving yesterday.
So are you guys like are you guys still, I think you were mentioning that the AWS credits are running out. What is that, what you were saying? Like, what does that mean?
So we were able to get like a stupid amount of free credits on AWS through their research program. But the research program is just a like 1 year program. And then there's an optional semi-secret like 2nd year extension, but they were kind of like, and then it does not go farther. So our 2nd year ended Sunday. So this month is the first time we have to actually pay for what we're using on AWS. It's less than what we were paying once upon a time when we were on Heroku, so it's still all good. But I mean, it's more than we were, less than we would be if we were using equivalent resources now.
Okay.
We were much tinier on Heroku. Yeah, so it's not a like change of anything we're doing, just a change of we're actually having to pay for what we're doing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It happens sometimes.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. Is there anything critical anybody wanted to go through on their updates? Or questions people have about stuff they're working on or stuck on?
I'm not stuck on anything. I think I just need to update my pull request, like given like some of the feedback that you guys gave me. So thank you for that. And then yeah, like I said, I think I updated the doc. I think we agreed when we met before that I would work on search like after this, like adding some more robust search functionality. But I also saw that there was a conversation about assigned pages being removed, so I didn't know if that needed to be like culled from the front end like page or not, or if that's not a high priority.
I don't think it's a high priority. It's just, so we were talking about it before, and I realized that I keep talking about that as a speculative idea. So I brought it up in the Slack channel for analysts. And pretty much everybody was like, yeah, we're not using it, predictably. So I was just sort of posting back. The results of that is I asked, and it ought to be pretty fine to remove. So if you want to work on that before you work on search, go ahead. Otherwise, someone will get to it when someone gets to it. Maybe me, maybe you, maybe Dan or Kevin, whatever. I don't think it's high priority, but it would be nice to get rid of so that there's not a confusing extra thing in the UI, and for both people writing the code and for people using it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'd rather also like stuff that's just hanging out in the code that's not being used tends to break. I feel like it's just inevitable when no one's caring about it. So yeah, I could do that before search. That should be fine.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Yeah.
Anything else? Gretchen, it sounded like maybe you had a question when I was skimming the notes, but you were still writing.
Just for like in the discussion section, when we get there in the meeting.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to bring up is I edited a bunch of crazy things to the analyst sheet script last night for caching, because the problems there have only gotten worse. I mean, the real fix is for me to figure out indexing and whatever other problems are happening in Postgres. But as an emergency workaround, I added some caching so that you could resume the script in the middle. But I think I'm just gonna merge it because it's sort of a hotfixy thing. It's already running in production because I had to do it to get the script to finish. But if somebody wants to review it, feel free. Let me know that you're gonna do it. Otherwise, I'm gonna just probably merge it in an hour or so. It's not the most beautiful code in the world, but basically we make a gajillion HTTP requests to the API, and they're all super slow. So this just caches them on disk. So if there's a cache, it just reads them from the cache, and then it blows away the cache when the job is complete. So you just have a sort of way, if the job fails in the middle, you can run it again, and everything it's done so far will just happen immediately instead of taking 45 minutes. So pretty straightforward. And yeah, I didn't get the indexes stuff done in the last 2 weeks because I got distracted with related things for the Pages API, which has some similar themed issues. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm doing the version stuff. I'll just do the Pages stuff, which then turned into a whole big thing. So I need to go back and split those up and just merge the version stuff, because clearly it's a bigger and bigger deal as time goes on. And the other thing I might try in relation to that is fooling around with the database a little bit. So I might enlarge the database to see if having more RAM helps significantly. And I'll post plenty of messages in the ops channel and the general channel if I do that and it makes a difference. Because then we'll have to sort of swap them out. So there might be a little bit of downtime or something. So just so everybody knows. But that's all the updates that I think are a big deal on what I've been doing. last couple weeks. Should we just move on to the discussion items then? Cool. So just so everybody else knows, so Dan and I had a call with Jonathan yesterday to talk through, sort of wrap up of all the stuff he was working on. I think we assumed and found out that a couple of the pieces are pretty straightforward. We just have to finish them off since he didn't. But the stuff with the private cluster, I think the result is it's not really super well tested. It might need some updating, and we definitely need to make sure that the way it's written out matches what we think. And we're also missing some pieces of the configuration files for it that Jonathan's looking for. So what's probably going to happen is Dan is going to tear down that private cluster that he set up, since we're not actively using it anyway, and is going to work on trying to make sure that he can set it up similarly and make sure that it still seems to make sense. And then at some point we'll switch over to it. But for now, we're going to sort of tear it down and not keep it around as a permanent thing, since it's not actually doing anything particularly useful for us. Do you have anything else you want to say about that, Dan?
Yeah, I think we started the call thinking that we would go through and try to make sure we could follow his instructions. And then by the end came around to the view that because he couldn't explain why things were done the way they were done or point us to like, resources to understand what the trade-offs of various approaches were, that we're probably going to start from scratch as far as the VPC thing goes. Is that still where you are on that, Rob?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's definitely lessons learned from what he did, from things that we can reverse engineer and the parts that he could explain.
Right.
But it's probably, it won't be exactly the same when we put it together again.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it's at least he got as far as making a working private thing, so that is valuable, right?
Yeah. So I think that's the big thing there. What stuff did you want to walk through? Did you want to walk through the rest of this, Gretchen? Since I think this is all you.
Yeah, this was just a cut and paste from what I wanted to bring up in the analyst team meeting, because we, but it's specifically about the technical side, so I thought it'd be best to bring it up here. For the next All Edgy meeting, which is next week, we every working group needs to present kind of, just like a brief catch up on like where we are with our, kind of current, like kind of what's going on now, especially with regards to like our current, grant deliverables, where are we going next, what kind of funding do we want, and so, just to kind of, figure out the next steps as far as fundraising goes. And so I wanted to bring up kind of the basic discussion of like, how is the direction of the project going, like with regards to kind of what was initially laid out in the Packard grant. I kind of laid out my kind of in large part, like, these aren't the specific deliverables, but they're kind of like the themes of the deliverables. And it seems like we're doing like, basically like what I wrote here. Like, I think, some of the deliverables, especially with regards to like kind of, stuff in Scanner, we're reprioritized down below other, like a lot of other work to really prioritize like functionality for analysts. And so just curious, like, are these still priorities? Should we, are they not? Do you think it's feasible that they'd be done by March 2020? Should we kind of like figure out a kind of different communication plan around that? If not, just kind of just those things. Wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the ones you sort of wrote out here, it would be good. I know you or other folks have been talking with, I've forgotten the name of the person who's now in charge of Web Integrity Project. It might be good to talk with them about whether they want to be using Scanner and what the the path forward for that is?
They do. We didn't talk about a path forward, but she did say her name is Sarah John, or Johns. But they do. They're using Versionista right now, and also are like running out of funding. So that's in part. But yes, they would be like a very willing first partner. But if it's really up to us.
Okay. We should find a time to talk about that maybe now, and a time to talk with them about it.
From a getting more funding point of view, is achieving a partner a really good selling point compared to the other things on this list?
Good question.
It's my guess, but I would be interested in literally anyone else's take on that more than mine.
Packard is really interested in like they're interested in kind of solutions orientation. Is what they conveyed to us in our like the last time we spoke with them, which I think is like great because that's also kind of the direction of where we're all headed, of like, what's going to be the most impactful, especially for a new incoming administration. And I think that having some joint outputs from WIP and EDGI, especially around things like the web governance principles, and kind of any joint database would I think that would be like viewed very favorably, just because like we're the two organizations doing this work, and to have kind of a unified voice of like how this work can like help the next administration rebuild and improve.
Yeah, I think as a technical reviewer, when I see one organization stop going their own way and decide to learn someone else's thing, that speaks well to the quality of the thing, because it's hard to get people to do that.
Have we also crowed to Packard about the fact that Wayback is now using our stuff? Because I think that's also like a good thing to talk about on a funding level in that same vein.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. And we put it in the annual report, which we sent to them.
Okay.
But yeah, that's definitely for sure a big thing to highlight.
Yeah, one that we should make a bigger deal of for funders in particular, probably. Since that work has like a super broad impact, because then anybody can make use of it, other nonprofits or journalists or whoever, and it's not tied to any particular system or anything. Workflow system. Was I just thinking? Also, so you mentioned sort of like working on a database together and everything, and that reminded me of the discussion we had last week in the analyst meeting about possibly having a new site or something that's focusing on the important changes, or whether that's a way that we reframe the like web monitoring page on envirodata.gov.org. Since that happened after any meeting here, I don't know that. I think I mentioned it to Sarah and Kevin at the Hack Night that night, but probably you haven't heard about this, Dan. Yeah. So one of the things that came up in the analyst meeting, Gretchen has been pushing people to try and ideate useful new directions instead of just continuing on the sort of monitoring and report writing. One of the things that we talked about was two parts, like from an analyst internal side, going through all the stuff in the important changes sheet, because not all of those have reports written about them, and sort of recategorizing them according to the new scheme, since only the newer stuff is categorized that way. But also making the content of that spreadsheet somehow public. And then there were other ideas of like what we could do powered off of that. But that also immediately shoots us off into a like, well, what's the right way to make that public? Should we have sort of like a mini site focused around that data, and providing it both as a public data set and as a browsable thing that looks kind of like web monitoring UI, but not exactly, because it's less workflow focused. So it probably wouldn't have, well, it would have some form of the annotation stuff, but not where you edit. You just view maybe, and try and focus on a more public friendly browse interface. And maybe that's also a place to prototype or test out various thoughts around how do we signal that you should think hard about how you write about these things. Although there's less of an issue there because all of those changes will be things that, because we've noted as significant, they've had time to sit for long enough to not be like, oh, you're overreacting, like it's broken today, but it might be fine tomorrow.
Right.
Which is the problem we've worried about in the past.
I really like that.
Yeah, so that was the big idea there, but that necessarily entails like, oh, it's a whole new thing. This is very buildable, but it's totally separate from the scanner infrastructure we have right now. So curious what people think about that, but also just want to make sure you were all aware of that conversation, since it has to happen in these two places, in the dev group here and the analyst team, in half an hour. Kevin, did you have something?
I just had a question. Just thinking about this public database thing, it sounds like it would be a nice way to transition to like a real annotation stuff. Like this is where we can like test out things and just see how it works. So it might be like that makes the most sense. This progression from where we are now to this public thing, and then the actual like analyst annotations.
Yeah, I guess like I see a clear path and need there to make the annotations that we have public in that site, but I'm less clear on whether it makes sense to have people be able to write annotations on that site. Cool. Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I just meant like just being read only, then we could prototype a web page, or Scanner is a web page. It's on a website.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As we're still mulling over the right way to break this up into projects too, or to refactor that at a package level, this would inform that, because then we'll have two things that need some of the same pieces. Might actually break some of the degeneracy there and make it easier to move forward.
Yeah, I think there's also, because that data set is relatively static or small, so it could be sort of statically rebuilt. There's an interesting question there about whether it should be powered off of our database and API, or whether it should just be something that we build statically, which would also be an interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're worried about getting hammered with press attention, a static site is pretty appealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any other thoughts or questions about that?
Sounds exciting.
Cool.
I was gonna say, sounds like a good idea.
Awesome. Let's see. And then the other thing I should note, so first bullet point, Gretchen, the annotations. So hopefully, I think Sarah's work plan is she's currently working on cleaning up how the layout stuff is implemented in Scanner. And then she's going to work on improving search so that you can like filter by time frame and all kinds of other stuff when you're on that page list view. So you can do more than just like type in a piece of a URL. And then the next thing probably is to work on the user interface side of turning annotations back on, like getting those forms working right, making sure it all submits right. And probably, almost undoubtedly, there will be things I have to fix on the database side since it's been unused for so long. But there's definitely like a clear plan to get there, and somebody who's super excited to work on it.
That's so awesome. Nice.
Yeah, I feel like that'll take a little while to like land, and it'll probably be good to get your thoughts on it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that exist in the API that just aren't surfaced in the UI. So I'm gonna work on bringing some of those to the surface so that people can take advantage of them. So yeah.
That's really great.
Let's see. Is there anything else we should try and talk through about this stuff?
It sounds like all in all, all these are things that are still on the docket. And does like what's now August? Does 7 months seem like feasible?
I think so, but clearly I've been overly optimistic in the past.
As have we all.
The one that's the least under our control is the one that the least under our control is WIP, but the others I feel like we can find a way to declare victory on that in 7 months.
Mhm.
That seems likely.
Yes.
Awesome. Great.
Cool.
But I think I cut you off, Gretchen. Sorry, you were saying. Or no?
Sounds like we're good then. See you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks, Sarah, for coming.